everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let's do a recent reads wrap up and upcoming TBR. I have been in a massive reading slump, booktube slump, and I apologize for it. I have so much happening behind the scenes in my personal life, starting with work stuff. We're in the process of trying to sell our house. It's just been very busy time. And I have not had the time or the energy to read and put out content, but I'm hoping that will soon calm down and change. So let's do a recent reads wrap up. I, as a result of not filming for a while, have a lot of books to talk about with you. I have actually 8 books to chat about with you here. One DNF though. So we'll start with that one and then we'll go in terms of my least favorite read to my most favorite read. So the one DNF that I do have is Britt-Marie Was Here by Fredrick Backman. This is not a permanent DNF. This one is a very character-driven novel, and I started listening to the audiobook, and I actually got about 50% of the way through the audiobook, and I was really enjoying a lot of this. Britt-Marie as a character, she's a much older woman who is dealing with kind of this separation from her partner that she's been with her whole life and really doesn't know what to do with her life now. And she decides to move to this new place to get this new job and kind of gets roped into being this like little league soccer coach. And it was really cute. The problem I was having was just not being in the mood for this type of story. And the supporting cast around Britt-Marie did not feel super fleshed out. So while Britt-Marie herself is a character I really enjoyed, I didn't get a good sense of like who any of the other supporting players in this book were. So this is one that I would like to revisit in the future when I'm not so slumpy and physically read instead of listening to the audiobook to see if it helps me enjoy this one, because I have a feeling like this sounds like a type of story I would absolutely love. So I have a feeling it was just my mood. Starting with my least favorite read that I did finish, this was a 3-star book, and it is The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This is one that I had heard about everywhere. I think it even won like the Goodreads Choice Award for last year for thriller, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't really get it. My expectations when I go into thrillers is just looking for a good time, and this one, because of all the hype surrounding it and because it was this big Goodreads Choice Award winner, I was expecting it to be a little bit more than just like a good time. And unfortunately, it really wasn't a good time, nor was it really anything different than what I've read before. The actual like climax of this book felt very underwhelming, and like the twists and turns really weren't there, and it just was very dull. I don't know, it like while I was reading it I was engaged just fine. Like I never thought about DNFing this one, which is why it gets a 3-star, but at the end I was kind of just like, that didn't feel like anything really special. So I don't really understand like why this one was so hyped up. Maybe if you've never read a lot of thrillers before, this might work a lot better for you, but for some reason, yeah, I didn't really understand the hype for this one, and I thought it was just okay. I'm not mad that I read it, but I also still don't really understand the hype. The next one that I have is a 3.5-star, and that is The Wife Upstairs by Rachel Hawkins. So I've read Reckless Girls by Rachel Hawkins earlier this year, and I enjoyed that one. I also gave it 3.5 stars. This one was a similar reading experience where while I'm reading these books, listening to them on audiobook, I am really enjoying my time. Like I never think about not finishing them or anything like that. So they always like have me engaged and actively trying to work out the mysteries. For me, this one just felt very, very familiar. Like I've read a lot of these types of domestic thrillers at this point, so nothing was particularly shocking or twisty about this one. It felt very much like a lot of other domestic thrillers that I've read. So I would say if you're a really seasoned thriller reader, this probably won't do anything super new for you. But if you've never read a lot before, this might be really enjoyable. I did really like the twist on Jane Eyre. If you didn't know, that is what this book is kind of a modern retelling of, is Jane Eyre. And I like the way that the author gave nods to the original and kind of twisted the story into a more modern retelling. I thought some of the stuff was very cleverly done, but it was so predictable and familiar for me that I really couldn't fully enjoy the ending. All right, now moving on to my 4-star reads. The first of the 4 stars that I have is The Lightning Thief by Riordan. I finally read it. I finally read the first Percy Jackson book. I had never read these as a kid growing up, and I definitely feel like I missed out. If I had read these as a kid, I probably would have loved them, and I'm so excited to pass these down to my daughter one day. I think she's going to love them. Percy Jackson is a good time. It's a really fun middle grade. I love the friendships in this one. I love the quest type story it had. And the way it weaves in some Greek mythology is really fun. So I just had a good time throughout this entire book. Was it anything like groundbreaking, unbelievable, amazing 5-star? No, but again, I think because I'm an adult reading a middle grade book, it probably wasn't ever going to be that. If I had read this as a kid, I probably would have been like, yeah, favorite, 5 stars. So I'm definitely planning on continuing with the series, and I can totally understand why so many people love this book. So definitely interested in continuing on. All right, the next 4-star I have is, I think, going to be a surprise to a lot of people. It was a little bit of a surprise to me. It is Locklands by Robert Jackson Bennett. So if you know my channel at all, you know that Foundryside and Shorefall were both 5-star reads, easily one of my favorites of all time. I love those first 2 books so much. Now, Locklands is the conclusion to the trilogy, and it really feels like a pretty big departure from the first 2 books in the series. So this book starts off with a pretty large time jump from the second book, where a lot of the world has changed and a lot of the character situations have changed quite drastically from where we leave off the characters in the second book. So it's kind of jarring going into this one at first. And I will say my reading experience for this one might have been largely affected by things going on outside of my reading life, outside with personal life stuff. I started this book and got 200 pages in and was loving it, was absolutely 100% engaged, and then work stuff came up where I could not concentrate on adult fantasy at all, adult epic fantasy like this. I could not concentrate. My mind kept wandering, and I was like, you know what, instead of trying to push through, let me put it down for a while, come back to it when I know I'm in a better headspace and can focus and can really enjoy what's going on. And so I had to put this down for a couple weeks, and I think if I hadn't had that distraction, I probably would have enjoyed this a lot more. But I will say, even if I was in the right headspace, I think that this would definitely still be my least favorite in the trilogy due to the focus. We really had to shift focus from the first 2 books. There was a lot more emphasis on the action scenes, and the magic system becomes so abstract in this book that while I was able to follow the magic system in the first 2 books, it gets really complex in this one, to the point where I really couldn't follow the action scenes at all. It was very abstract concepts that I'm not a visual reader anyway, but really could not even try to visualize. So a lot of these action scenes that I feel like took up the majority of the book, I just was not seeing it, was not comprehending what was going on. So I really didn't feel very engaged during those big action scenes. And the first 2 books do such a good job of focusing on this found family aspect. The cast of characters is so amazing, and we really had to shift focus to becoming very much a plot-driven book in this one, where we really didn't get to spend a lot of time with the characters and their relationships and that found family aspect that I loved from the first 2 books. That was definitely missing in this one. So for me, this is definitely my least favorite in the trilogy. I do still think that the conclusion of it, I don't know that it could have ended really any other way. So I liked the conclusion of it. I liked some of the reveals at the end. I thought it had a huge impact. So I think that it was still really well done, but just what the focus had to be is not my favorite thing. Personal preference as a reader, I much prefer less action, more politicking, more character relationship stuff, and that just wasn't the focus of this book. But I would still say that the trilogy as a whole is still one of my favorites. So I still highly recommend it, even though this third book is not my favorite, because it's such a good series. Like, those first 2 books are so good. And then my last 4-star read that I have, and my favorite 4-star read that I read, is Half a Soul by Olivia Atwater. So just as I said, I was reading Locklands during that tough time, I decided when I put down Locklands to pick up Half a Soul because I wanted something cozy, I wanted something lighthearted, and this delivered everything I was looking for. It was exactly what I needed at the time. It is an adorable Regency era fantasy romance about a girl who has an encounter when she's young with an elf who, during this encounter, something goes wrong and he ends up taking half of her soul. So when she gets out of this encounter with this elf, she finds that with the remaining half of her soul that she has, her feelings, her emotions are much more like subdued than they were before, and she just has a hard time fitting in after that happens. And in this Regency era historical period, fitting in is the most important thing. Being a proper lady is the most important thing. And so our main character, Dora, just is navigating this kind of time period. It's just the sweetest little story, and I loved the romance. I loved our main character of Dora. I thought it was adorable. I do feel like it could have been longer and gotten a little bit more development of some of the supporting characters. We get a little hint of like some of the things that have happened to these characters in the past to shape who they are today, and some of it gets quite heavy. I think that this does a good job of balancing like the sweetness with a little bit more of this like heavier content as well. But I would have loved even more exploration of all of that. I would have loved even more slow burn romantic encounters between the 2 main characters in this one. I basically just wanted more from it when I got to the end, but nonetheless, it was still adorable. It was still 4 stars. I will definitely be reading the other books in this series. I know that they're all kind of standalones, but they're all in the same universe. So I absolutely adored it, and I love Olivia Atwater's writing, so I'll definitely be checking out more from this author. All right, so moving on to my 2 5-star books, and I'm just going to talk about them at the same time because it is Fireborne and it is Flamefall by Rosaria Munda. So these, I participated in the Penguin Teen read-along that was happening at the beginning of July, and that was kind of in anticipation of the 3rd book releasing at the beginning of August. And I did a lot of buddy reading for these 2 books with my friends Elle from Elliott Brooks and Roger from Rogers Reads, and oh my gosh, I had so much fun. I mean, it's hard to say you had fun reading these books because they're so heavy and depressing, but I had so much fun buddy reading it with them, and hearing their reactions to everything was a blast. I don't know which of these 2 books I enjoy more. I think I enjoyed them equally, and again, it feels weird saying I enjoyed these books because the reading experience for this one is not necessarily fun. Like, Half a Soul that I was just talking about is adorable, sweet, cozy. These are the complete opposite of that. This is a series about a post-revolutionary world where the people who usurped the original rulers of this society have now taken over, and you're kind of examining society in this post-revolution world. And the questions that this asks is like, is the new rule really much better than the old one? And your 2 main characters come from 2 totally different sides of the pre-revolutionary world, and they're kind of forced to come together after the revolution. And the way that those 2 characters see things and their journeys are colored by their past experiences are just absolutely fascinating. I think what so much stands out about these 2 books and this series as a whole is the focus on the politics and the like economic challenges and societal challenges of running this post-revolutionary world. In a lot of ways, at times it felt very dystopian because of its heavy focus on those types of themes. You almost feel like this is a dystopian world with dragons running around in it. It's fascinating, and I think that the 2 main characters, you really feel both of their struggles so much. You definitely can see their sides of the story, and at times you're rooting for one more than the other, and then your opinions switch based on the circumstances and what's going on, and it's just fascinating. It's such a good series that I feel is very nuanced in its discussions that it's having, and goes into a lot more of those nuances than I've seen any other young adult series do. I love this series, but I wouldn't say it's like a fun time. Like, the whole reading experience is very tense, is very anxiety inducing, is very much like you're on the edge of your seat the whole time. You just don't know who's safe and who's not. And I will say the twist at the end of the second book, I did not see coming. I don't understand how, why. I definitely need the third book. So I think that this is just a really well done, well executed YA series. I truly think this series can be enjoyed by anyone. So those are all of the books that I've read recently. Now let's talk about some of the books that I'm planning on picking up very soon. And I have already started a couple that I'll talk about. And honestly, I am fully embracing my mood reading right now. I am very much feeling like a reading slump is coming on. The first book I've already started, and something that I turn to when I am feeling very slumpy and like a reading slump is coming on, is I'm still able to read fantasy if it's a series I've already started and I'm already very familiar with the world, the characters. I don't have to focus a lot to get my bearings. So I am reading Heir of Novron, the third and final bind-up in the Rosaria Revelations. This is 2 books in one, so it's very large. It's 900 pages long, but there are 2 books in it, so it makes me feel a little bit more accomplished when I reach the halfway point that I've actually finished a book. So luckily, my mood isn't affecting my reading experience too much with this one because like I said, I'm already familiar with the world, I'm already familiar with the characters, so I know what's going on. I've heard that this is a lot of people's favorite bind-up in the series, so I'm hoping it's also my favorite in the series. I still prefer Legends of the First Empire series over Rosaria Revelations right now. Who knows, maybe that will change. I doubt it. But it might change with Rosaria Revelations. I just don't know. So we'll see. I'm like hardly in it. I think 100 pages into it, so I don't have too many thoughts yet. But hopefully I will have at least one of these books in the bind-up to talk to you about in the next wrap-up. I also just stared at my shelves for a while and said, what sounds like something I will read right now, because I was feeling so unbelievably slumpy. And I grabbed 14 by Peter Clines, which apparently it says is a riveting apocalyptic mystery in the style of Lost. So I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. Picture Lost in an apartment building with a cast of ordinary people, some comedy, plenty of charm, and the stakes being the end of the world, and you'd come close to capturing what makes 14 tick. Right now, I'm like 100 pages in, and it's very fast-paced, which is exactly what I need. And it feels very like haunted apartment building. There's weird stuff happening in this apartment building that this main character moves into, and he's starting to investigate what's happening, and I'm very intrigued. This is like exactly the type of book I needed for this slump, because it's really fast-paced, it's very easy to follow what's going on, and it's got that like mystery intrigue that keeps me turning the pages. So I'm very curious about this one, and I will let you know how it goes in the next wrap-up. Another book that I am buddy reading with Leanna from Leanna's Library and Elle from Elliot Brooks, coming up at the beginning of August, is The Book of Gothel by Mary McMine, which is a retelling of the Rapunzel fairy tale, but I think from the perspective of the villain, Mother Gothel. So I'm very curious for this one. I have been definitely wanting to read it. Again, I'm hoping, because it's a retelling of an existing fairy tale that I'm already very familiar with, I'm hoping that it's easy for me to get into. Then the last one that I definitely have to get to because of a buddy read is Fury Song by Rosaria Munda, the third and final book in the Aurelian Cycle trilogy, and I'm super excited. I was very into Flamefall, and the ending of Flamefall is a humongous cliffhanger, so I am very excited for Fury Song. So that's 4 books. And I feel like that's already plenty because of how large Heir of Novron is. But let's pick out one more book together. Okay, I think I figured it out. So this could easily change based on my mood. But today, what sounded most interesting was Nettle and Bone by T. Kingfisher, which I know is a very recent favorite of Elle's. And it sounded like a dark fairy tale with a lot of humor, and it's short. So I don't know about you all, but when I'm feeling slumpy, reading short books is usually a way to help me through a reading slump because I feel more accomplished. So I'm hoping that the mood strikes me and I will be very interested in Nettle and Bone. All right, so those are all the books I'm planning on reading that are coming up soon. Did you see any books that I've mentioned that you have any thoughts on? Leave those comments down below. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye.